The following program is an original production of WICC PBS Chicago.
Tonight, signs of hope in the housing market. Waiting on the sidelines, why now might be a good time to buy or sell in Chicago.
Street parkers catch a break. Mayor Emanuel announces free Sunday parking. But at what price? Find out who could actually end up paying more.
Talking tough. The Cubs chairman threatens to move his long-suffering team out of the city. Is he bluffing or playing hardball?
And they used to get it for free, but now the city is in hot water over a plan to make nonprofit groups pay for the water they use. These stories and more tonight on In the Loop. Good evening, I'm Barbara Pinto.
And I'm Chris Bury. Tonight, an in-depth look at Chicago's real estate market. Could there be signs of life? New sales figures show home sales are emerging from a 5-year coma. Is this the beginning of the end for the worst housing market in decades?
But is this a positive trend with some staying power or just an upswing before another letdown? Tonight, perspective from those in the trenches, a developer, a buyer, a seller, and a broker. Tom Walsh knows the neighborhoods and streets of Chicago. For 20 years, this real estate broker has sold ownership in the city, one house at a time. After watching a booming market go bust, he's regaining his optimism.
Regardless of how tough it's been, I still love this business.
After the real estate crash in 2008, Walsh says things got even tougher.
People basically had to put their lives on hold. And now I feel we're seeing better days here.
This past March was the busiest for Chicago home sales since 2008. The Illinois Association of Realtors says nearly 8,000 existing homes and condos were sold in the Chicago metropolitan area, and prices were up 2% over last year. Those modest gains, a welcome relief from the way things were just 4 years ago.
I would say at least 50% of my business was getting people out of these situations where their mortgage was more than what the property was worth.
Many of those homes languished on the market for more than a year, only to sell at a loss. These days, Walsh says inventory is low and more buyers are looking. The seller's market is back. But instead of multiple offers wildly above the asking price, today's bidders are bargain hunting, offering to pay well below.
Oh, hi, Mr. and Mrs. Scala. How are you?
Joe and Shirley Scala of Chicago's Portage Park neighborhood sold their home in just 2 weeks for a bit below what they were asking. The retired couple wanted to move last year, but like so many sellers, held off until the market recovered. They're glad they did and stunned at the speed of the sale.
We didn't think that it would be 2 weeks. We thought it would probably go away till August or September, but that was nice.
And while sellers like the Scalas are happy their homes are going so quickly, buyers, meanwhile, are getting frustrated.
And there's just nothing. There's nothing on the market. I had no clue.
Judy Tillman lives in the Logan Square neighborhood with her 2 dogs. Now she's looking for a 2-flat with no luck. Her frustration typical in today's marketplace.
Oh yeah, there's like 3 or 4 other brokers there showing people. So you kind of got to, maneuver around other parties as they're looking as well.
Judy's plight is a positive sign for real estate developers like Tom Romano, in business since 1994.
There's not an inventory base, so we're trying to build up that inventory base, and it's all good news as far as we're concerned,
And good news for the struggling construction industry. Romano says he's building at least 3 multi-unit condos and hiring hundreds of workers.
I haven't felt like this in probably 5 years, so I think times are back here in Chicago. It's alive.
Since the crash of 2008, many home buyers and sellers have been waiting on the sidelines. So is now a good time to get back in the game? Joining us now to discuss this and more are Albie Galoom, real estate reporter for Crane Chicago Business, and Zeke Morris, president of the Chicago Association of Realtors. Hello and welcome to you both.
Thank you, Barbara, for having us.
Well, we'll start with you, Zeke. Realtors will always say it's a great time to buy, but what makes now different?
Well, in our industry for the last 5 years, we've been telling our clients If you don't have to sell, don't. But we have reached what we call a perfect storm. First time in my 20 years of real estate that we can get both price and the best interest rates possible. So when you think about it from that perspective, I would think over the next few years will be now is really the time to get into the market.
Well, people look at this and they say, you know, we haven't seen home values rise that much, and here in Chicago we haven't either. I'm just wondering, some skeptics say we've seen some gains, but what are the guarantees that we're not going to fall backwards and people will be in the same situation they were, say, a year ago? Albie?
Well, we have seen gains. I mean, if you look at single-family home prices for the Chicago area, they're up about 5% year over year. So that's a good sign. And I don't think there's a lot of concern about us sliding back. I mean, I think if you look at the data, you can probably say with some confidence that we hit the bottom last year and we're on the way up. How quickly we move up is a big question. I mean, I don't think we're going to see real big gains over the next few years. I think it's going to be kind of slow and steady. And obviously, some of that depends on what happens with the broader economy, too.
You mentioned the bottom last year. We have a graphic we can show you and show our viewers. March 2012 compared to March 2013, which was a boom, I guess, of sorts here in Chicago. Real estate closings are up 18% year over year. I'm just wondering, how optimistic should we be as we move forward here? Or do you have a great deal of optimism? Is it measured, and if so, why, Zeke?
Well, I think the biggest thing is as you point to what happened in March of 2013, is our inventory levels reduced by as much as 40 to 50%. So for the first time, we are starting to see a clearing in some of our faster moving neighborhoods of inventory, which means that now we can go back as realtors to our clients and say, hey, take a look. I know that we looked at this 4 or 5 years ago, but today is different. We now have the ability to look at price points again, and I think with that, we'll move in a positive direction.
You talk about faster moving neighborhoods. Where are the so-called hot spots in Chicago at this point?
Well, you look at places like Logan Square. You look at Bucktown, look at Lincoln Square. Hyde Park has always been a stable neighborhood, and in those neighborhoods we see investment, meaning that investors are investing, as well as the opportunities for the future. People still, housing is the biggest essential in our lives, and people want great housing, and I believe that it's now a time for people to take a look at that.
Now, you work in Hyde Park. That's been a stable neighborhood pretty much. But there are neighborhoods in your vicinity on the south side that have not really seen much traction in terms of real estate growth and, frankly, are still pretty distressed.
Right.
Why is that? Why are those neighborhoods not getting traction, and when can we expect to see that change?
Well, look at it from the perspective of Chicago, and let's take the South Shore neighborhood. About 80% of the product in South Shore is condo. And condos were hit the hardest in terms of the loss of clients being able to move in and out. The associations have become financially unhealthy, and with those being unhealthy, they now are becoming the association and or the building is what we call unwarrantable, which means that you can't get a loan. And so because those areas are prominent, when you have that, it's very difficult to get someone in a position to actually buy who has the ability to, and also so our price values have dropped from that perspective.
Let's talk about home values. I mean, that's a big deal, and a lot of people we're sitting on the sidelines and just waiting, hoping that the value of their home would creep back. Albie, when you look at the past couple of years, even the past 10 years, how much ground have we gained and lost in terms of home value?
Well, if you look at where we are right now, we're still 34% below the peak in 2006. And we're about where we were in 2001. So while prices have come up a little bit, we're still well below the peak. So for people who bought at the peak of the market, they're still looking at a loss if they're trying to sell their house. Obviously, this is dependent on the location of the property, but you know, for people who bought at the top, they're still looking at a loss.
Now, give us a reality check here for people who are sitting on their homes thinking, well, I'll wait. What can we realistically expect over the next year? If conditions stay as they are, How much property value can you expect to gain by sitting on the sidelines and waiting another 6 months or a year?
Well, I think that what you'll see is you'll see what we have is the more traditional 6 to 8% increase year over year. And with that, if you, as we move and get more people interested in the market, that's where we'll get a push. I don't believe that we'll go back to the 20, 30%, but I think at a steady rate of 6 to 8 is really a realistic number.
And as people go into this process, I mean, have we kind of been beaten down some? When you sell your home, are most people expecting they'll lose money?
Well, not so much that people should lose money. I think if you look at it from the perspective of folks that have been in their home, taking care of their home for 10 years or more, typically are going to be in decent shape. Now, no, they're not going to experience a huge gain, but they can reasonably get out and move forward. The positive for that is that now they can also, if they want to step up in terms of buying, they can buy a lot more property for a lot less. And so about the same money that they're spending today, they could step up their value of house.
We have a short bit of time left. I'm just going to ask you a quick question. Your best advice given the conditions of the market for both the buyer and the seller? If you're a buyer, I don't think you have to worry as much about home prices falling. And I think that was holding a lot of people back. And, you know, let your life circumstances dictate whether you buy a home or not. I think part of the problem that we had during the boom was that people were looking at a home as an investment, and you know, it's really a place to live. It's not an investment. So again, if you have kids and you need more space, buy a home. I don't think you're going to, things are going to turn out too badly for you. We will have to leave it there. We are out of time, gentlemen. Thank you for being here. Free Sundays, that is the compromise offered up by Mayor Emanuel for the city's parking meter mess. Here's Chris with more.
Mayor Emanuel is fighting back. This week, he announced changes to a controversial parking meter contract that he claims will save $1 billion. Some parkers will benefit, others not so much. The plan would mean free parking on Sundays in most neighborhoods, but expect to pay even more downtown. And we asked some Chicagoans what they think.
I think the mayor did the best he could. He got a better deal, I think, for everybody. Sunday free, I think, is very important. That kind of really is not a good thing when you have to pay to park on Sundays. The later hours, I think what they could do is maybe allow you to buy more hours. So like 3 hours at a time instead of 2, something like that. But the 1 extra hour won't kill us at night, but the Sunday free is a good deal.
It seems to me that the parking meter company probably got a good deal out of this. They got 3 more hours every night and Sundays during the summer. You know, folks come down here in the summertime, they go to the beach, they go to the lakefront, they go to the festivals that we have. All of that is within the area where we've had expanded parking to midnight, and we still have to pay on Sunday. So I'm not so sure we got such a great deal.
I think our previous mayor sold us down the river for a few extra bucks, and I think we've been getting the shaft ever since he sold the parking ticket rights to a different company outside of the city here, you know.
I love to drive, but it's ridiculous. It's so expensive to park that it's much more reasonable, especially as a senior, to come by train.
On Sundays, no one's really here. So why would it be free on Sundays when nothing's going on Sundays? Let us at least keep a peaceful medium and have a 9 o'clock start with the discount. And free parking in certain areas, there might be less travel areas where no one even goes.
It doesn't really seem like there's a good way to fix this. It was a stupid deal in the first place. They never should have given it away for 75 years. We already spent all the money, from what I understand. So yeah, it's a bad situation, and anything that we can do to help it is probably a good thing, I'd say.
Daley screwed us over. Okay, and if you're going to do it for everybody.
Chicagoans sounding off there. Joining us tonight with their 2 cents on the parking meter deal and other trending stories are Matt Present, editor of Grid magazine, Eric January, author and financial expert, and Nancy Hardy, reporter with WBBM News Radio 78. And welcome to everybody.
Thank you.
So the mayor has said, Matt, that he is making lemonade out of lemons with this deal. Do you buy that?
I think he's got lemons, and here we have lemons yet again. I mean, the fact of the matter is this was a bad deal to start, and it's going to be a bad deal to end. The consortium that Morgan Stanley organized, they're not going to let this go. And so what we have here is we're balancing, a minor benefit, with a fairly substantial imposition for River North residents.
Eric, what about this trade-off here that some neighborhoods will get Sunday parking free, but if you're downtown, look out?
I believe it's another example of injustice. We should all be getting treated equally, no matter what part of the city we're in. So if we have free parking on Sundays, everyone should have free parking on Sundays. And it is certainly a bad deal, but I don't think that, as Matt said, and as they've said in various newspapers articles, you can't put lipstick on a pig. It's not going to make it any better.
Nancy, what about the fairness question here?
Well, there was one idea that maybe some of the neighborhoods that don't have the income levels that River North generates should see more of a discount, that the mayor should have taken this as an opportunity to separate the pricing and have more structures even, and we didn't do that. Another reason why a lot of people think that this was not any better and could actually be worse. And
even handicapped people, from what I understand, are going now to be asked to pay at meters if they can somehow make it to the meter.
Wow. It's unfortunate, but it's just a bad deal. And we have to figure out a way, I believe, with the citizens group that has actually legally challenged it. The mayor should join in that challenge, but he's probably reluctant to do so because he also wants to apparently lease Midway Airport. So he doesn't want to, I guess, set a bad tone for people that were potentially interested in investing in Midway. But I think the deal legally should be killed somehow.
And this is a 75-year deal.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't think the mayor is interested in picking a fight that he's going to lose. This contract was legal. It was a bad contract, but if you're going to have an environment where, the city can contract with private business, it needs to be reliable and it needs to be consistent. And you can go to court over it, but you're going to lose.
And while we're talking about financial headaches for the city, the churches now have teamed together with nonprofits, and they're demanding a repeal of the water fees. They were given an exemption, and Cardinal George has said that water is a gift from God. Nancy?
Well, and that also prompted an interesting response from Alderman Pat O'Connor, who said, I think the church maybe want to focus a little bit more on some of their own problems. The fact is, the city has to replace these century-old pipes that they've been, digging up around on the north side. You can see they're massive, they're falling apart, and somebody's going to have to pay. Residents are already seeing their bills go up, and the suburbs that are getting their water from the city, they're going to have to pay more. It's not popular, but I think everyone needs to bear a little bit of the load.
The argument from the churches and the nonprofits is that they are providing services that the city does not.
Yeah, and there have been several financial impact studies, and there's a solid argument here that the city stands to benefit from these tax breaks. Obviously, a lot of the non-for-profits are reaching communities and reaching citizens that the city doesn't get to, and they're doing it potentially in a more efficient manner. In terms of the proposal, I'm not sure that it's the wisest idea to base it on assets rather than net income.
Just to be clear here, if the nonprofit has less than $1 million in assets, they wouldn't have to pay any water.
That's right, and it's tiered, and between $1 million and $10 million, I think they end up paying 25% of the bill, and then on up, it's tiered as well. But it seems to me like basing this on assets is probably a backwards way of thinking about it. We certainly don't want our non-for-profits that have buildings which are considered assets to have to take out have to refinance or anything of that regard.
But Eric, the city is $300 million in debt. Just this year's budget deficit. Can it afford to give tax breaks to all these churches and nonprofits?
It certainly can't, because it's not only the water bill that we're talking about. We're also, non-for-profits are not paying property taxes, and we're essentially passing the buck to other people that have to pay for these services. As we mentioned, the sewers have to be rebuilt. People that are in the suburbs just got hit with a huge tax bill, and I think that the water bill is really a minor, insignificant amount. Anybody that pays a water and sewer bill in Chicago knows we have some dirt cheap water for the most part. So I don't think it's unreasonable to ask a not-for-profit to pay for the services that they're actually receiving from the city, because they also get free garbage collection as well. So there are a number of things, and we just can't continue to pass the buck to other citizens.
Let's move on to the sports desk. And now, for the first time, the chairman of the Chicago Cubs, Tom Ricketts, has actually uttered the words in public that he would consider moving out of the city. Is this a bluff, or is this just negotiation? Nancy?
Well, the Ricketts family does own and has plans for property, or developing a hotel across the street from Wrigley. So I think that it's really maybe a little hardball. Just putting it out there. The negotiations have been moving really slowly. I did hear a representative of the rooftop owners saying they are talking about it. So maybe this has already achieved its purpose, where negotiations will go a little bit more smoothly.
Matt, why do you think that Ricketts took this step when he has been so cautious up until this point?
I think there's a real question as to whether he maybe intended to utter those words or whether they just sort of fell out of his mouth. I think potentially he's trying to engage the mayor a little bit in this process. The Emanuel administration has remained fairly silent here. Obviously, they've had their differences with the Ricketts family, since the fallout with Tom Ricketts' father, Joe.
Because Joe was supporting Governor Romney.
Sure, and supporting a
campaign against Obama.
Right. The campaign ads, which were fairly incendiary. I think he's just trying to move this process along. I don't think anybody really thinks that that Wrigley is ever going to be a place where the Cubs don't play baseball. It's one of the iconic stadiums in the world. It's a tremendous asset. The team's profitable there. But he's trying to expedite the process, and this is a chip that he has to play.
Eric, what do you make of this threat?
I really believe that he said he's a business person that's used to getting things done in a timely manner, and I believe he just really said it out of frustration. And I do not believe that he has any intention ever to move it out of the city of Chicago, because it has just too many intangibles that make it a profitable team already. And the thing that he wants to do is just to make it more profitable, because ultimately he is a business person. They're probably looking at some type of return on investment, which I don't know what type of return on investment people get owning major league franchises. More probably a status symbol saying that you own the Chicago Cubs.
Although the Cubs supposedly, according to Forbes, are the most profitable team in baseball. Mm-hmm. But to your point, the Cubs have released a series of sketches, and these sketches would include more signage in right field. There's going to be a big sign where it now says Wrigley. That will be some kind of an ad. And then over in left field, there's going to be a 6,000-foot jumbotron with lights aimed at the outfield. And then outside the park, of course, in the hotel that we were just talking about, there's going to be even more advertising and more signage. So when you look at these renderings, Nancy, what do you think?
It is interesting. Ricketts was saying yesterday, in kind of explaining this comment, that he wants people not looking in their laps at their smartphones. He wants them looking up at the field, and of course at all of these signs and advertising. But you really need a reason to look at the field, right? You need to have a better team out there performing that would make somebody look. Or maybe these jumbotrons will be a distraction from the players.
Right. And Eric Ricketts also said that this is going to make Wrigley Field look old.
Well, adding the jumbotrons and everything is definitely going to add some modern amenities to a very old park. So certainly Wrigley is going to look old, but I also think it may be a turnoff to some of the fans, because it's going to make it so commercial. And one of the things about Wrigley versus the new ballparks is that it still has that old-time feel. And when you look at the stands in Wrigley, they're constantly jam-packed. Whereas you look at most of the other stadiums, they're empty. So I think that I don't think it's going to necessarily add that much value. Maybe.
And Matt, do you see this when you look outside, especially? Mm-hmm. Do you see this turning Wrigleyville into kind of Times Square with garish signage and lights everywhere?
There's good old-fashioned and there's bad old-fashioned, right? So I would say the bathrooms in Wrigley are probably bad old-fashioned, and increasing the capacity
Put some jumbotrons in
by
there,
46%. Right? I'll take new bathrooms with new signage. In terms of the area, we all know what Wrigleyville is. I don't think extra signs or extra lights are going to really make much of a difference. That's not a calm area during baseball games. And frankly, compared to the behavior of a lot of fans, I think that signage is the least of a given resident's concerns.
Very quickly now, today President Obama has nominated Penny Pritzker of Chicago, billionaire and former school board member, to be the U.S. Commerce Secretary. Nancy, any thought on that?
Well, the Pritzker family and their Hyatt hotel chain has had a lot of combativeness with the unions. They haven't been able to agree on that. I'd imagine that'll make a lot of people unhappy. And when she was serving on the Chicago Board of Education, she was also about to make some unpopular decisions, people believe, with the closure of schools, another union that was not happy with her. So,
but perhaps another good connection for Chicago in the White House.
Right.
Well, thank you so much, Matt Present, Eric January, and Nancy Hardy. You can take the CTA to work or home or out to dinner, but did you know at one time you could take it to your grave? One WBEZ listener wants to know the history of the L funeral car. The answer in this week's Curious City.
Well, I think what you want to know, you want to find out the history, the funeral trains and what cemeteries did they go to.
I'm going to show you some maps that are very old. When I looked at this map last week, I was probably the first person in 110 years who'd ever looked at it. This is Calvary Cemetery in South Evanston.
Calvary Cemetery once had its own train stop.
There's a little depot here. There's the depot.
At the time, lots of cemeteries did. In the late 19th and early 20th century, rail lines were a common way to reach most cemeteries. And to get there, people rode the train as usual. Except there could be a corpse in the baggage car. In 1905, the Metropolitan West Side Elevated Railway changed that. They built an exclusive funeral car with room for mourners and the corpse. It offered service to Concordia and Waldheim cemeteries in the western suburbs. The last funeral car ran in 1934, but their history is alive in these boxes.
To learn more about Curious City, log on to our website, wycc.org. Vote on the story that most interests you, then tune in to In the Loop. We'll bring you the story with the most votes. And that's all for this week. Thanks for tuning in. You are now In the Loop.
The conversation continues right now on wycc.org. I'm Barbara Pinto.
And I'm Chris Bury. We'll see you next week, and good night.